Hey guys, it is time for us to start Unit 7. We're going to call Unit 7 The Rise of the Dictators, and this is going to carry us right into World War II. So this is a short unit before World War II, but again, it really leads directly into that conflict. So the reason it's called The Rise of the Dictators is in the coming lessons, we're going to cover some pretty infamous people. We're going to look today at Benito Mussolini, the fascist leader of Italy. Then we're going to look at Joseph Stalin, the oppressive communist dictator of the Soviet Union. And then, of course, Hitler and his National Socialists, better known as Nazis, who took over Germany. We'll round out the unit by looking at the rise of militarism in Japan in the 1930s. So our goal today is to figure out what fascism is and then how Mussolini was able to rise to power and lead Italy for the better part of 2 decades. So let's get into his the background here and talk about nationalism and how Mussolini was able to hijack that phenomenon and that feeling. So here's a quick picture of Mussolini. He was a man who was a revolutionary at heart. In his youth, he was a committed socialist. And he was a guy who, really felt that he was going to participate in a socialist revolution of Italy. And that, of course, will change later as he turns against socialism. Anyhow, so let's get some background. Why is Italy in a position where it is likely to be taken over by a dictator? And post-war Italy was suffering from all kinds of problems. There was high unemployment because the economy was in shambles because of World War I. Taxes were very, very high. Trade was down. Italy was also upset that they didn't get as much land as they were expecting to out of World War I, even though they were on the winning side. There were lots of different factions within the government, whether those are anarchists or communists or socialists or Republicans or whatever. They're all fighting amongst themselves. So things are just a downtime in Italian history. And into this steps a man who had been a newspaper editor and a politician named Benito Mussolini. He had served in the First World War. He was a guy who had a troubled past. In fact, he had famously been kicked out of school for stabbing students, which is a rather sad thing to be thinking about. And as an adult, as a guy coming out of World War I, he decides he is going to be the savior of Italy. He's going to survive. He's going to revive Italy by bringing back its economy, rebuilding its military, making it proud and strong once again, and putting Italy kind of at the forefront of Europe. In 1919, the year after World War I ends, he establishes what's known as the Fascist Party. We'll talk more about the name in a moment, but this party, its popularity grew and grew as the economic conditions worsened. This is kind of a theme we're going to look at with fascism and communism, is when things are going poorly in a country, people often are desperate and they'll turn to anyone who says they have a solution to the problems. Now, in terms of what fascism is, a little bit of background on its origins of its name first. So in ancient Rome, there was this symbol known as the fasces, and the fasces was basically a bundle of sticks, often tied around an axe handle, and it was a symbol of power and unity. So imagine one stick. It's very fragile, right? But if you had a bundle of those same sticks, together they're much stronger. And the message was strength through unity. And that's going to be the symbol of this fascist party. So this fasces symbol, while it is certainly infamous because of Mussolini in World War II, its origins was not an evil symbol at all. Again, it was a very positive thing, strength through unity. And you'll find this fasces symbol in places you might not expect it, like the seal of the United States Senate. There are 2 fasces on that. Here we are looking at the Supreme Court building in Washington, D.C. Notice there's a prominent fasces right there. Here we are in the Capitol Rotunda, in the Capitol building, and there are fasces all over the place. And here we are at the Lincoln Memorial, and guess what? 2 fasces. Here we are on the floor of the House of Representatives, and you can see parallel fasces in the background. And just one more example, guys. George Washington, there's one as the sort of the leg of the table. And here he is standing next to a giant fasces. Again, this symbol means strength through unity. So what Mussolini is trying to do is he's trying to build up people's feelings of nationalism and feelings of resentment that Italy is not where it should be. And he was a great speaker. He was very charismatic. He was exciting to watch. He really had the gestures down, as you can see, always flailing his arms, shaking his fist, screaming, and people really were mesmerized by this. And his followers were incredibly nationalistic. They believed that Mussolini was going to turn Italy into a new Roman Empire, bring back the glories of ancient history. All right, now let's get Mussolini on the path to power. And one of his tools at his disposal was this group called the Black Shirts. And the Black Shirts were basically like his private militia. Their job was to go out in the streets and do combat with rival political groups like the communists and socialists. And again, they wore this distinctive black shirt, hence the name, the Black Shirts. And this will be his entourage that's going to allow him to gain more and more power and use more and more intimidation and violence. And there's Mussolini with his Black Shirts. So his moment of destiny comes in October of 1922. Things are really bleak in Italy, and he decides, Mussolini does, to take advantage of that and march on Rome. In fact, this is called the March on Rome. And about 30,000 fascist followers are going to march with him to the city of Rome. And there he is going to confront the national government. And basically the supporters are going to say, put Mussolini in charge of the government. And the threat was there. You know, it was an unspoken threat, but the threat was there that if Mussolini weren't put into power, these 30,000 people might turn to violence. And this could be a rebellion. And so what the King of Italy at the time, King Victor Emmanuel III, says is, okay, to avoid a civil war and to avoid me being, you know, kicked off my throne or something, I will give in to Mussolini's demand. So going forward, Italy will continue to officially be a monarchy, and there's a King of Italy, but he is just a mere figurehead, and the real power is in the hands of Mussolini and his followers. So now that Mussolini is in charge, let's take a look at what happens to Italy as a result. And like a lot of famous dictators, he had a title that was supposed to project power. And his title was Il Duce. Il Duce simply means the leader. So it was a statement of, you know, I am in charge here. I am Il Duce. I am the leader. Hitler, by the way, was also known as the leader in German, which is Der Führer. But we'll talk about Hitler later on in this unit. Here's Mussolini being Mussolini, right? Got the facial expressions and all that good stuff there to show off his masculinity and power to the crowd. And he really did try to cultivate this image of him being the alpha male. You know, there's images of him. You can see him here. He is fencing. He's riding horses. He's out harvesting the crops with the peasants without a shirt on, you know, showing his brawny physique and all that stuff. And this is something that hardline rulers still do to the present day. A great example of this, a funny example of this, is Vladimir Putin, the current ruler / dictator of Russia. Here he is famously without his shirt on because he's got to show off the people he's super manly or something. I'm not really sure what he's going for here. Now, the fascists are in charge. They have control of all the means of media, so all the radios, newspapers, newsreels, everything was all in the hands of the fascists, which means they control the messaging. The people will only hear what the fascist party wants them to hear. Elections are going to continue, but these elections are basically fake. They're designed to produce fascist victories every single time, so it makes it appear as though the people love fascism. If you decided to criticize the system, or, God forbid, even speak out against Mussolini in person, you could be thrown in prison, you could be kicked out of the country, you could be tortured, and you could even be murdered. Because Mussolini, like Hitler and Stalin, had a very robust secret police that would, hunt down people who were disloyal to the state, and propaganda was just going full steam to produce that that loyalty in the people for the government and for the leader. Loyalty to the state was emphasized above all else, and by the state, of course, we really mean Mussolini himself. And you were basically informed that you as an individual don't really matter except as a member of the collective. Remember, strength through unity, right? We're all in this together, so we're all one body of people, and so we're only important as a body of people, not as individuals. So whatever individual plans you have with your life should really be balanced with the needs of the state, and the needs of the state are basically whatever Mussolini says they are, right? You should do whatever he says. In fact, here's a great example of that, right? So there's Mussolini, and on behind the head there, it says C, 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 and repeating, and C is Italian for yes. So you're being told, yes, Mussolini knows all. Now, Mussolini was very interested, you might even say obsessed, with creating large Italian families, because that would give him, of course, more soldiers to fight in his wars, more workers to build his stuff, more people to brainwash, basically. And so he called on the Italian women to win what he called the Battle of Motherhood. Didn't realize motherhood was a battle. And the more children you had, the more patriotic you were, and the more loyal you seemed to the government. In fact, if you had enough kids, you would be recognized by given medals. And if you had 14 kids, women, you could have your medal presented to you by Mussolini himself. So you get a fancy medal to show off how many kids you have, just how patriotic you are. Now, what to do with all those little kids is, well, brainwash them. And so the Young Fascist was established to basically force Italian youth into a quasi-military organization where they learn how to march around, they learn how to wear a uniform, take orders, shoot guns. They're basically being groomed to fill the role of his soldiers one day. And as a member of the fascist youth, you were told about how great Mussolini is, how awesome Italy's destiny is, and that you're part of that destiny, that you're going to bring back the glories of ancient Rome. And so by the 1930s, you basically have a whole generation who know nothing but Mussolini, and in theory, they're ready to go fight and die for Mussolini in any particular war. A couple of propaganda images here showing us the fascist youth going about their daily activities, like, jumping through fire and over bayonets, normal stuff that people always definitely do. So now let's look at some characteristics of fascism. We've talked about why the name fascism came about, but let's look at what actually it is and its beliefs. So, a couple of beliefs of fascism. Number one, extreme nationalism. So way back when we learned about what when we learned what nationalism was last semester, I told you that nationalism can be a very good thing, but in its extreme version, it can be a very bad thing because it can lead to intolerance and hatred and violence. And that's what we're going to see with fascism. You're going to have a centralized authoritarian government. That means, of course, a dictatorship. The state and the leader are glorified as all important, and you as an individual are seen as insignificant except as a member of this group. So that is what fascism is all about. And you can see that idea of the individuals meaning not much except for as part of the collective. Notice these little people here making up Mussolini. There he is with his fasces. Here's some propaganda. Only one heart, only one will, only one decision, it tells us. And notice how you've got this image of Mussolini over the crowd. Here's a great propaganda image of Mussolini flying a plane, again showing us how awesome and masculine and tough he is and all that stuff. But there's also some symbolism here, because remember, the leader was the person piloting the country, and so it's symbolic of him being in charge of Italy, guiding the country to its destiny. Now, another key component of fascism is militarism. Remember, militarism is glorification of war and the military, and everything in a fascist state is really painted as a struggle for national survival. That is, there's some enemy out there that has to be defeated. It's us versus them, right? There's whoever the them is. Could be communist, could be a democracy, whatever. It could be an ethnic group, right? There's somebody out to get us, and we have to band together and fight for our survival. And that means, again, glorifying the war, and glorifying the military. And there's Mussolini checking out his soldiers as they march by. What we're actually going to find out is that this military of Mussolini's is not going to perform very well in World War II, it turns out. For all the bluster and talk of glory, the Italian army does not do well in World War II at all. It's frankly rather embarrassing how bad they do. Now, you might be thinking in the back of your mind, though, hey, this whole fascism thing, it sounds kind of like communism, right? You know, dictatorship and tough government and no opposition and throwing people in prison for having different ideas and so forth. It turns out that even though they do have some similarities, which we'll get to in a moment, these two ideologies hate each other. Okay? Fascists and communists are sworn enemies. They are seen as, they see the other as the devil, and they see themselves as the angel. All right, now let's look at those similarities between the two philosophies. Fascism, communism, what do they have in common? Well, blind obedience to the state and to the leader, right? You don't question, you just do what they tell you to do. In fact, having a mind of your own is seen as disloyal. There's a cult of personality that's created around the national leader, and by cult of personality, I mean that the leader is glorified as almost godlike, and that you should basically worship the leader because he knows all, and he is this father of the country that you must obey and believe in. Both of these philosophies prey on tough economic times. In other words, when times get tough and people get desperate, maybe they're unemployed, maybe the economy is crashing, whatever, they sometimes turn to extreme ideologies, which fascism and communism both are, both extreme, and in hopes for a better future. And they both claim to, promote this idea of social change, radical change, that once you put us in charge, everything will get better. The old days will be gone, and then we're going to create a new world. And you'll hear that phrase a lot with both of these philosophies, that we're creating this new world. And that gives you a sense of destiny if you're part of it. It's intoxicating and tempting to go along with some of these philosophies. Okay, that is it for our talk on fascism and Mussolini. In our next video, we're going to talk about the rise of Joseph Stalin, an unbelievably awful human being who killed tens of millions of people. And we're going to take a look at his rise to power in the Soviet Union. And then after that, we'll look at Hitler. And then finally, we'll wrap up the unit by looking at nationalism and militarism in Japan.